You're listening to Cultivation Elevated, hosted by Michael Williamson and Anders Peterson, where we discuss vertical farming and the future of cannabis and food production.
Hey, what's going on, everyone? From Pipp Horticulture, I'm Michael Williamson, along with Anders Peterson, and you are listening to Cultivation Elevated, a podcast where we dive into all things cannabis, food crops, CEA, and vertical farming. Today, we're excited to share some insights and product development that the Pipp engineering team has been working on for the past year. And I'm joined today by Del Rockwell, our product manager, and who supports our engineering department. Del, how are you doing today? Thanks for being with us.
Not too bad. Thanks for having me on. Doing well.
Yeah, absolutely. So I was trying to remember because you and I joined Pipp in a kind of similar time period, but were you part of Pipp pre-horticulture division?
Yeah, for about like 8 or 10 months or so before we really started to dive into the horticulture side, so joined at just the right time.
Okay, yeah, I was going to say, so what was that like, joining, I don't want to say a boring company, but nothing's quite as exciting as cannabis. What was it like, joining a high density mobile storage solutions company, and then, 9 months later, they're like, hey, we're going to jump into cannabis, and by the way, you're going to lead that division.
It was crazy. In a lot of ways, it was like dream come true. Like didn't even really think about it at the time that like this was an industry that I wanted to get into. But at the same time, for those first months, like it was a job and I was happy with it. It was a good position to have, but there was nothing exciting about it. Like there's only so much you can do about back of house storage that you can really get your blood pumping on. So it was nice to be able to change it up. And I'll never forget stepping out of the meeting where talking to Tom French, like my boss, and him saying that I think that you're going to lead a lot of the product development on the horticulture kind of initiative, and walking out with like a shit eating grin, and took some pictures of like High Times and some of the magazines and stuff that they had to like say, hey, start the research and learn what you could, and instantly texting my friends and saying, hey, you'll never guess what I just got told I'm going to do now. So it was awesome. It was a crazy experience.
And so how long ago was that now? I mean, it's about 7 or 8 years ago.
Yeah, I think it was about 8 years ago that we started to talk about the horticulture and kind of make that an initiative and project for ourselves. And yeah, it was like just another year before that. So it was a while back. Been a
I
long
mean,
time.
and to give customers a sense of what's occurred in that 8 years, I mean, the products that you helped steer and develop for horticulture for Pipp, now there have been, I think the number is somewhere around over 4,000 installations to date of individual grow rooms worldwide. I mean, that's pretty impressive. And over that whole course of time, the product has been continually improved and tweaked and made upgrades based on feedback and things we've learned in the field. And that has kind of culminated sort of to what the conversation is today, at least, in the whole timeline of Pipp of what this new product release is going to be. A lot of that.
Absolutely. We learned a lot over these last 8 years. It went by incredibly fast. But we still are learning constantly, and we learned a lot, tweaked a lot, changed a lot, and this is definitely a culmination of a lot of ideas from ourselves and others as well, kind of integrated all into one product. So
Hey, can you back up a little bit for me and kind of maybe, yeah, if you could just describe your, I don't know, journey into engineering and product management, like kind of, I guess your educational background and kind of what led you to this point?
yeah, I was always into, I guess, STEM coming up through like middle school, high school, like just grade school. Knew that I wanted to do something in that area. Considered like architecture for a little bit, considered a lot of different science and biology and some of those other types of things. Ultimately decided that engineering and design was what I really wanted to get into. The time it was trying to decide between industrial design and then product design engineering. And now in hindsight, I'm very grateful to have gone the path that I did, which was product design engineering, just having the more engineering foundation and then a little bit of the design work as opposed to much more of the graphic arts and artsy side of things with a little bit of understanding on the technical side and manufacturing side. So the school that I went to, Ferris State, had a really good product design engineering technologies program that I was able to get through. And then after that, I was just looking for the job that I could get and happened to be Pipp. And then after that into horticulture. So
And then you grew up right in the area too, right? So you're like a true Michigander.
yep, born and raised Michigan, have never lived out of state yet. Still might come eventually, but Not yet. Originally from a little further down south, and then moved into the Grand Rapids area, and then college up in Big Rapids.
So
When I visit Dell in Michigan, he calls me Michiganders.
Yeah, we are Michiganders for sure, not Michiganians.
so what's your day-to-day role look like as a product manager over at Pipp, and how does it integrate with your engineering background?
In many ways, because I guess should explain that, and that started off as just a true product design engineer for the team. At the time, I was just the second engineer brought on to the team along with the senior engineer, and was able to just support on a lot of the like basic fundamental engineering development of a lot of the what we call non-standard requests and just other items that our customers are requesting. And stayed in product design through those early like 5 years of horticulture. So in every way, just a true engineer in that sense. And the product management shifted that a little bit, but just because I was so grounded on the engineering side, a lot of my day-to-day still ends up being very heavily based in that. But now just adding in a lot of the kind of aspects of project management, trying to help facilitate a lot of these projects through all the different departments, just getting a much wider scope kind of beyond the engineering and the true print creation and prototypes and developments. It helps out with sales and making sure that they have the information that they need, helping out on sales calls, as well as helping out with marketing and making sure that we're communicating all the features and benefits of our products efficiently and accurately. Kind of happy to have the breadth to be able to kind of touch a little bit of everything. So I enjoy being able to change it up and get swamped sometimes, but I enjoy being able to change it up and have a lot of different things going on.
I can
Nice.
attest to Dell's product design expertise. When I joined Pipp a little over 2 years ago, one of the first projects I was included in was the redesign of the vertical air solutions in rack airflow product. And I got to work on a team together with Dell, who very much led the organization and path forward for the design. And it was really interesting to see his brain work and his process of taking an existing product to VAS 1.0, taking all the best feedback, taking the best design elements, and then also having to work within the constraints of, we have to make a product perform better, manufacturing, ease of manufacturing and shipping, like all those things that go into designing a product. It's not just how the product looks and how it functions, but how is it sold? How is it manufactured? How is it shipped? How is it installed? And it was really interesting to learn from Dell and other members of the engineering team just what goes into it. I mean, it's pretty intense.
Could you kind of elaborate on that, Dell? Like maybe like let's just say like, a imaginary situation, boss man says, "Hey, I need you to develop this new product to fit X, Y, and Z problem." Where do you start? What does that process look like, kind of step by step? Because I think a lot of people, as Anders was highlighting, you just really don't know what it takes to bring a product to market.
Yeah, there's a lot of little things that go on behind the scenes, and kind of building off of what Andrews is saying. It was actually one of the comments that you had made to me. It was a couple of years ago. I think it was when we were in Europe. Kind of made it kind of off the cuff and pretty casual, but just like matter of factly that pointing to me that you're trying to develop the best possible product that you can. And at the time, it just stuck with me, and it kind of the time kind of bugged me a little bit just because like I never felt like I was totally able to develop like the absolute best possible product that I can. Just because like we could go through and we could specify like stainless steel on everything and the absolute best powder coat finishes on everything and the lightest weight materials, and we could build the kind of the golden spaceship that you guys talk about as well. We could design that, but it's completely different to have to deliver it. And on one hand, like one perspective, it definitely is restrictions and kind of parameters that you have to stay inside of, and just the real functional restrictions, I guess, on what you can actually do. But at the end of the day, like we have to be able to develop a product that is going to meet all the needs of our customers while also meeting the needs of the business, something that we can actually provide and provide reliably that we can stand behind for, 10 plus years while it's out and in use. It's just there's a lot of restrictions that and maybe restrictions is a bad word for it, but just other considerations that we have to make and kind of throw into the formula we use to make decisions. But as far as like that process and the day to day, like it still starts with, especially on my side, because kind of back to where I'd come into this. Like I always knew that what I enjoyed most about the design was how people used it. It's really easy to focus on just the trinkets and the design geometry and the features of a given product and the way that you're going to go solving a issue for your customers. But that's the important piece, is that it's for the customers. You still have to consider how they're actually going to be using it, how they're interfacing with it day to day. So I generally start off as best I can. I just want to make sure I understand what the problem is, like whether that's just talking to the sales guy and understanding what the customer is asking for, ideally talking to the customer and hearing in their own words what they're looking for, what their problem is, and then being able to read and kind of decipher, read between the lines a little bit. Because a lot of times a customer is going to tell you that my problem is X and this is Y, but then you read and listen to it and then you find that, well, the problem really isn't that specific issue. It's something a little bit further down the chain or a little bit beforehand that you can solve in a slightly different way. So it takes a lot of time to try to understand, but I always want to make sure I'm able to start with an understanding on where the customer is coming from and then try to solve from there. And
Validate like the root cause issue and not maybe whatever that complaint or potential band-aid solution type thing is.
Absolutely. And then naturally, there's always a bunch of different ways to solve any given problem. Kind of the classic engineering way is to like look at the problem and then solve a different problem and then make that first problem not a problem anymore. Just try to circumvent some of those things. It comes up that way sometimes. So yeah, I don't know. There's a lot that goes into it, but trying to get from the understanding, go through and design, being able to iterate on that, get it into customers' hands and see what their feedback is. I know that even designing it in isolation in the engineering team and then showing you guys what we're trying to come up with, it's amazing how many times we're able to do that. And you guys are immediately able to point to like, this piece isn't going to work. That's just not practical to the way it gets used. And it's something that just we as engineers, like kind of locked away in our lab, we're not able to know for sure how it's going to be used. And you guys just have that different perspective, and the customers, like even more so, just have that perspective to be able to kind of tweak and change and adjust what we need to develop and deliver.
Well, and vice versa. I've been a few times now with Dell to visit customer cultivation facilities. And I found it quite interesting to see what you focus on and what you're paying attention to in a facility with our systems installed compared to like what Michael and I are. And it actually taught me quite a lot and helped me better understand our product and some of the intricacies of it. Watching you walk into a grow room, because Michael and I are cultivation guys, so we look at plants, we look at how the product is used, but more so how the plants are grown on our product at times, where you're truly focusing on how are people interfacing with our systems, how is it existing in these cultivation environments, what can be improved, etc. So I found that. Did you find it interesting still? Like, do you feel like you get a lot out of going to customer facilities, and every time you go, like, I mean, you're learning something new about our product?
Absolutely. It's amazing how much we learn it, even if it's happens to be not necessarily under the best pretenses that we go and end up on site. Like the unfortunate side of it on my end is most of the time is because there's something wrong. They're either not comfortable with the solution or they're having some issues, and we end up going there to try to solve some of those problems. But even in those cases, it's still absolutely invaluable to be on site. It's just a whole different world and perspective. And Anders, you're pretty good about pointing it out to me when I kind of fall into this, but it's so easy to fall into this kind of internal viewpoint, looking at our own problems from too close and not being able to back out and see it from the customer's perspective or the user's perspective. And just being able to see everything in a slightly different light, and being on site is just a crash course. It's just always great to be able to be on site, talk to somebody, talk to the users directly, and then see how they're using it. It's ideal to be able to get in there and kind of just be a fly on the wall and watch how they're moving around and using the equipment, because still see stuff, actions, whatever the way that they use it, it kind of shocks me at times, sometimes in a good way, sometimes
I think I know one of the examples you're alluding to.
For sure.
And I think that's something that Pipp does well. You especially do well. You travel pretty extensively, especially these days. You're probably in facilities on a monthly or regular basis. And a lot of people who typically design and engineer products, sometimes they think they know best, or they get kind of, holed up in their workspace and really don't get out into the field. And I think that is some of the best feedback and the most important feedback in the several informational pieces of pie that I guess come together for product development. So beyond customer feedback, what are some other like really critical components to creating a product design? I think one of the areas that Anders and I are hoping you talk about today, because we find it to be very fascinating from like a weird science standpoint, like the validation and testing, like the materials testing is always like when you're like, oh, if you can highlight some of that stuff, that's always an interesting topic for us.
And maybe
Yeah.
even on top of the testing, but how it applied to our new product development and the new system we're getting ready to release here at Pipp.
Absolutely. So I guess I probably should start with just a brief explanation of what we're developing and launching and releasing out and showing off, I guess, debuting at MJ Biz, which is going through another overhaul or an overhaul to our carriage system, making it simply calling it just a modular carriage system to be able to bring forth some of the tenets that we've pushed through in our shelving and other components. Now just bringing it forward to the mobile carriages again. Just
Can you
making it
explain for some listeners what you mean when you refer to a carriage?
so. Looking in one of the grow rooms, like one of our customers' grow rooms, you always see the racks and the plants and the LEDs and everything. That's what most people's eyes gets drawn to. But down below, like one of the core values that we offer to our customers is the mobility of those racks. You can go multiple tiers and also are able to reduce everything down to one single mobile aisle. That's done by building out what is currently an aluminum frame that sits down below and underneath that racking with a mechanical assist drive box with a three-prong handle at the front. Turn the handle and that rolls that entire carriage run left to right along some tracks or at least a guide track, and just offers up a lot more mobility so you can pack more racking into that room, but then still also have access to that. And currently and previously, for a long time now, frankly, I think 20 years plus, our carriage design has been pretty, I don't want to say stagnant, but pretty much the same. It's just been tried and true, and it's been iterated on quite a bit, and it's just an incredibly robust carriage system that has a combination of aluminum extrusion channels along with some aluminum extrusion angles that build out a rectangular frame and has a bunch of wheels and bearings and sprockets and chains and everything included in there to be able to have that mobility and mechanically move from side to side. The downside of that was just the sheer size, and that framework was shipped pre-assembled. So now we've taken that framework and broken it down into components of channels and some spanners that connect those channels together to allow everything to be much more modular. So you can just add sections, you can remove sections relatively easily, but then you build on site. And making that change to that carriage, we knew it was literally foundational to our product line and something that had been around and kind of effectively unchanged for a very long time, other than some material specs here and there to better serve the cannabis market. And we just wanted to make sure that any changes that we made was going to maintain that robustness, that you were going to be able to trust the carriage system to perform the way that the previous systems had, while still offering some of the added benefits that we're able to include now. And that all circles back to that testing that we had built out a 72-foot carriage, which is a little long for what we would generally do. It's not something that we would normally approve without some elaborate testing. Loaded it up with a bunch of weight, and then
It was like thousands and thousands of pounds, right? I mean,
oh yeah,
I saw pictures of it.
I think it was even over. It was over about 5,000 pounds that we had in that single carriage, which was way far and above over top of what any one of our horticulture customers are ever normally going to put on there. Now, there's some outlier cases if you're flooding or soil beds and stuff like that, like can get pretty high up there. But yeah, at the end of the day, we wanted to overkill it. As engineers, we just wanted anything worth doing is worth overdoing. So we wanted to add a bunch of extra weight and then cycle test the crap out of it, be able to roll it back and forth, test some deflection values just to see how well that carriage stays in alignment over time and see if that kind of degrades as you add more and more cycles to that. And then ran that up to, I think it was nearly, it was right around 3,000 cycles, and there was probably a little extra on top of that, but about 3,000 cycles on one single carriage system, rolling it back and forth. And Thankfully, it performed extremely well. And now we're really excited to be able to put that out in our customers' hands, be able to start to get some in-field feedback. And yeah, I mean, I suppose I'm kind of oversimplifying it to say that we just cycled it a bunch of times, but yeah, we really just wanted to evaluate it and make sure that it was going to hold up over time.
How did those changes impact the customer? So I guess the change that I'm referring to would be transitioning from the carriage-based system to a modular skate-based system. Like, how does that? What are some of the benefits to the growers and I guess, the owners?
Yeah, the biggest one that I think most people are going to see is there's two different ways to go about it. Like the customer is in who's purchasing it. One of the biggest things that you're going to see is going to be some shipping cost reductions. By breaking it down and eliminating that full rectangular frame, we're able to pack things much more densely and pretty drastically reduce the number of skids or containers that we need to ship to a given site. That also cues us up pretty well to kind of in preparation for going to more international projects, like specifically in Europe, but even like everywhere else as well. Just being able to pack more densely reduces cost, helps out across the board.
And from your perspective, what are some of the benefits you see for like growers and maybe people who need to access or defoliate the plant and things like that?
Yeah, for the day-to-day workers in the grow rooms using our systems, one thing about the older aluminum carriage that was like comes pre-assembled is those aluminum extrusion angles that Dell was talking about. They prevent you from kind of slipping your feet underneath the side of a tray when you're walking up to a table with plants on it. And so it's kind of a little bit of a toe knocker, or like you kind of it prevents you from maybe getting closer, easier access to the tray. It's not a huge inconvenience, but it's noticeable if you're working on the lower level continually. This modular carriage, it eliminates that completely. So it's a lot more accessible when you're working alongside the rows and on the trays, but also it frees up a little bit more space. There's a little bit less restriction, so that air can flow underneath our carriages a little bit better, which is not negligible. I mean, any little bit of improvement to airflow helps the room, but also cleaning underneath that tray is significantly easier because there's less areas for pests and pathogens to hide, and it's easier to get cleaning utensils underneath those trays and carriages to really clean out your rooms. So, yeah, it helps from an IPM perspective, from a workflow perspective, from an airflow perspective. It's little things. But I've learned, full disclosure, I've been with Pipp less time than both of these guys here, but I've been in cannabis and cultivation for a long time, like Michael. And what I've learned is a lot of little things equate to big changes. And so this is part of that. And I think a lot of these, it sounds little in terms of the span of producing a pound of dried cannabis, but all of this adds up to the end product of working in the room, growing the cannabis, being able to sterilize the room and keep it clean, and ultimately, contributes to the final product.
It's that Wooden quote. I can't remember it exactly, but it's like it's the little details that are vital. Little things make big things happen. From John Wooden, former UCLA men's basketball coach. For those of you who don't know the name, but you're 100% right. It's those little things, and I think
I don't want to also downplay that these are little improvements. In fact, for Pipp, this is quite a big change and a big improvement to our system to help our customers. But as it's a big change to us, it's helping those little things for our customers to make their day-to-day easier, their purchasing process easier. And so in the whole scheme of building a cultivation facility, it may seem like a little thing to them, but it's actually quite a big thing to us and for our customers.
Yeah, I guess kind of building off of that, if you don't mind for a second, is just like the word synergy, I guess, is the corny way that I'll start it, is just that all those little changes, they do stack up and they add up to more. There's no one individual change that we made that's going to be like really loud and overt. And like I'm happy and really excited to be able to introduce this and kind of debut this at MJ Biz, but to most people walking past, you wouldn't necessarily see a huge fundamental shift to it, but those little things are still there and they definitely synergize. And I also have to give a little bit of trivia because this is a good way, like the carriage specifically, the changes that we've made is a good way to show and to see the other major integration. One of the big things that ended up contributing to us making these design changes was the acquisition of GrowGlide and bringing their team and their wealth of experience and knowledge and their customer base, their feedback, and even their product design processes and decisions that they've made were able to integrate with ours. You had on the GrowGlide side a extremely modular and caster based system, and on our side, the Pipp side, had a full frame aluminum carriage, and being able to kind of merge the two of those, bring them together, and end up with this modular carriage system that I really do think has the best of both worlds. And the sum of the whole is greater than the sum of the parts, and we're excited that it worked out that way and worked between the two teams.
And there was
Nice.
probably a lot of, because GrowGlide had deployed so many of those more modular carriage type designs, it probably helped. Did it expedite or help your product development process, knowing being able to work with their engineers and their team on what worked and what didn't for them? Because I know they went through a lot of iterations on their carriage design too over the years.
Absolutely. Like they were not only a wealth of information for the cultivation and sales side, but on the product development side. And it was apparent if you had ever seen any of their product beforehand that they had a good polished product with a lot of really good ideas baked into it. And being able to talk to them, it was fascinating, like as an engineer and as a designer, to be able to look at their product and then finally be able to talk to them and understand why they made so many of the decisions that they made or that they had made, and some of the features that made it into it and which things they chose to not include. It's always fascinating to kind of backwards engineer, and in this case, just be able to converse with them directly to understand why they had made those decisions, and then be able to take what was going to fit in the long-term plan for our product line and integrate it into ours. And again, the modular carriage is just a great first step to be able to show that integration and combined product line. And we're definitely hopeful for a lot more things to come out after this too.
Yeah, like we also, I would say one of the more noticeable differences is the drive box. Where the actual handle is to move it is Pipp has historically had it centered in our racks, and now we're moving it over to the left side, similar to GrowGlide's. I think that's going to be one of the more visually striking or noticeable shifts when people see the new system. It looks pretty sweet too, I'm not going to lie.
I'm excited about it. I know that it's easy because our product was around for so long, it was relatively static and just hadn't changed a whole lot and was due for a refresh. So I'm glad that we were able to make that change and get some functional changes, and that it just helped us eliminate some places for failure. We were able to eliminate some costs with some chains and sprockets, make the overall system a little bit more responsive, and then at the same time, kind of breathe a little bit of fresh air into the design and give it something that's a little bit more aesthetically pleasing. So yeah, we're excited about it.
What's been one of the most rewarding and challenging products you've worked on at Pipp, and I guess what made it stand out for you?
That's a great question. I think like I am extremely proud of this modular carriage that we're rolling out just because of how many things went into it. How like as much as it was a relatively, I don't want to say relatively straightforward, but still relatively small change visually to somebody outside of the company. There's a lot of things that went into it. But that all being said, like I still stand by. I think the Elevate deck is still the most rewarding thing that I was able to develop and work on. It was one of the last projects that I kind of took through to completion as just the true engineering side and not really into the project management and product management side of things. And I feel relatively confident to say that it was one of the best improvements to like labor efficiencies and customers actually working with and integrating with our system, specifically on multi-level up in second, third, fourth tiers. I'm extremely proud of how well that has worked for us, how well it's worked for the customers, and just the end result of the overall system.
It's no secret that a good amount of the Pipp designs have been replicated, it would be a nice way to put it, with others. Do you look at that as like a form of flattery, or do you find it to be like a pet peeve?
I do take it as
How do you view that like mimicry that, especially when something that you came up with you, the team, and really flushed out, and then someone just comes along and makes something that looks extremely identical by coincidence.
I mean, there's a little bit of a twinge of like frustration. Like there's almost no way to, I think, eliminate that entirely. But at the end of the day, it is absolutely flattery. Like I am in a lot of ways validated by seeing that the idea was that hit the right note, like was doing the right things, had the right features and benefits, and did it well enough that somebody else feels the need to add that offering to their own product. So yeah, I'm not pleased to see other duplicated products out there, but at least I try to take it in a positive light that obviously it's something that works well for people.
I know what you mean. I think, and Anders can probably relate to this as well. We see this something similar in the cannabis breeder industry when people are putting out seeds and new genetics and things like that. And someone will be working a line for years in some cases, something they're extremely proud of. They take a lot of possessiveness over it because it's something that they've helped to create, even though most likely, someone helped create what they started with to some degree. And so you see this series of passing it on. And then sometimes people will come along and they'll basically just grab your work and then do some really quick breeding with it, give it a new name and a new shiny box and call it this new thing. And you're like, man, this other person over here did like 5 to 7 years worth of like real work, like the real work, the heavy lifting. And, you know, in the breeder world, it kind of goes one way or the other. It's usually like they're insulted and they're, at war online with each other, or the opposite is, and the perspective that we've tried to take with some of our projects like at 303 Seeds, is we find it to be flattering. I remember when Compound Seeds launched their Jet Fuel Gelato series with our Jet Fuel G6, and they had asked for permission, and we said, of course, and you just kind of, I think, for the greater good of the plant, and in the case for what we do at Pipp, for the greater good of our customers, we want to see these advancements in multi-tiered solutions. We want to see people pushing the envelope. And as you highlighted, it validates that 5 or 7 years worth of hard work that you did because someone couldn't come up with something better. So it's pretty cool. But yeah, a lot of crossover there with the breeders.
Definitely. And I just want to add into it too that like as the like pure designer side of things, that the design process is always iterative and you're never starting from absolute ground zero on anything. Like even when we had developed the Elevate system, it was based on a lot of other ideas and scaffolding and other products that existed, and then taking a lot of the ideas that we liked and then bringing that forward into a design that worked for our system. It's almost some parallels with like software and programming and open source that at least I really appreciate and like that mentality of everything being collaborative and trying to share ideas, and it all works towards the betterment of the solution of solving that particular problem and designs. I know that corporate ends up getting in the way of that. Sometimes you have to protect your business and your product that you're offering up. But from the philosophical side, I guess a little bit, like I like that iteration. Like at the end of the day, nothing is done in isolation and everything is collaborative. So I appreciate it.
You said corporate, but when I think of Pipp Horticulture, and this is something that I think is a misnomer in the industry, they think of us as like this big, giant corporation, and it couldn't be any further from the truth. I like to think of Pipp as almost like a mom and pop. I mean, I know we've got some employee count and we've got some infrastructure, but the business is really run with that personalized, kind of smaller C-level team, which is kind of unique compared to a lot of other vendors in the industry.
Definitely is. And at the end of the day, it's still a pretty like relatively small team that works together to put out everything into the horticulture business. Like at the end of the day, we're still just a small portion of Pipp Mobile as a whole. We still have a larger portion that does all of the standard back house retail storage and that side of the market in our company. It's still relatively small for us. So yeah.
Can you talk about that too? Because when I try and explain like Pipp's parent company, I use some story that goes something along the lines of like, if you've ever been to a mall, there's like a 70+% chance if you have to go in the back and they ask for your size, like, let me go check in the back. There's like a 70% chance it's on a Pipp rack. Does that sound about right?
That is spot on. Pipp Mobile had been around or has been around for 40 plus years now
Almost
at
50
this
years,
point.
yeah.
Yeah. And yeah, it's exactly what it was. We started off originally as like file storage, and then after 2008, that kind of went away, or at least was dramatically reduced, and then pivoted a little bit into back of house retail storage. And the line about the mall is spot on that the vast majority of those stores end up using our racking and mobile in the back of house to be able to store all the product before it goes out onto the show floor. Still have the same space and storage density issues that we see in the horticulture side. Obviously, a pretty significant flavor change to go over from one industry to the next, but it's still all the same basic principle of fitting more stuff in less space and being able to access it efficiently. So yeah, there's still another much bigger portion of our business dedicated to that and still focusing on and improving and iterating there as well.
Can't remember. I think I was in Boston, but I was in like a Canadian Goose store or something, and they have those like cold rooms where you can put on their jackets and you go in a freezer. And the guy was giving me like a lot of salesmanship. And so I was just joking around with him, but I go, "Oh, do you offer vendor discounts?" And he kind of looked at me funny. And he's like, "What do you mean?" And I was like, "Well, I'm a vendor of yours." And I had no idea if he had a pip rack in the back, but I just knew there was a 70% chance. And so yeah, he was like, "What are you talking about?" I was like, "Oh, go in the back of your storeroom, and if it says PIPP on the little, mobile storage stuff, then you're a customer of ours." And so he went back there and he was like, "Oh man, sure enough." He was like, "Yeah, well, guess I'm a customer." He goes, "I don't know about any vendor discounts though." So yeah, it's always amazing. And I guess, Anders, from your perspective as a grower, why should a grower care about 50 years of I don't know, financial stability in a market, even if it's outside of horticulture. Like if you're a grower and you're looking at different vendors and different solutions and you're evaluating stuff, like does that carry weight for you?
Yeah, it didn't used to, I would say, maybe 10 years ago. Like I've been in cannabis purchasing equipment and various supplies for, 15 years or so. And I've seen a lot of vendors come and go. When I build a cultivation facility, I expect it to be around for, 15 to 20 years. And so when I invest in equipment, I'm investing in a partnership with an equipment vendor. And I want to make sure that they can be around for the life of my facility and my business to support that product that I'm buying from them. That's what always drew me to Pipp even before working for them was the strength of the brand. It kind of has a little bit of that Kleenex vibe where you see mobile vertical racks and you call them Pipp racks and they may be ours or not. But I think just that ability that people think that way just shows the kind of strength of the business. Um, yeah, I think it's a benefit that Pipp does business outside of horticulture, for our customers specifically and for the growers because that diversity in industries that you work across provides stability when I mean, think about it. Cannabis compared to other industries is highly volatile. We have high highs and low lows. It goes ups and down. And that's where those low lows is where we lose a lot of equipment vendors, whether that's lighting or fertilizer or you name it. Every time the industry experiences those dips, we lose a lot of equipment vendors and products on the market. Um, Having that diversified revenue stream, for a company like Pipp being outside of horticulture allows us to weather those storms and allows us to continue innovating, continue developing, continue adding resources to the team, where a lot of other companies, it's tough to do that, unfortunately. So I
As a
view it as
biologist, is that just natural selection?
a little bit of natural selection, but strong will survive, I guess, is what, the truth is. But the reason being is there's business outside of horticulture too. So I think that's a huge benefit. That and also, you know, for our customers cost wise, being able to install thousands of retail installations a year in malls and, outside of horticulture allows our installer network to be very powerful. Um, they know
Mhm.
how to install our equipment in every single state, almost every major metropolitan area in the country. We have people who know how to install our systems. And I think that's a huge value add for our horticulture customers. Something, frankly, I didn't understand until I worked for Pipp. It wasn't clear to me until I really got to see under the hood how valuable that is. But I think having the retail side of our business is a huge benefit to the horticulture side and vice versa. I
Yeah,
think
it
they
goes.
benefit each other.
I can kind of speak to that one a little bit. Like it goes both directions from that design side and back to some of the other considerations that go into developing a given product or solution. it definitely goes both ways, and that we were able to pull a lot of the retail-centric solutions and products and pieces, components, and able to use them over on the horticulture side, like maybe with a little tweak on corrosion resistance or something along those lines. But it helps us to keep the cost down because we're able to kind of pool that volume and consumption in a given SKU, which is a benefit in both directions. And then on top of that, we're able to improve the carriage and come up with this new modular carriage, for example, that we're hoping to in the future bring over into our retail customers as well to give them some of the exact same benefits. And we'll transition from retail into horticulture and then back from horticulture into retail to just continually improve all of the products that we offer out.
As you talk about the future a bit, where do you see the future of vertical farming and CEA or controlled environment agriculture heading in the next, let's put a date on it because it gets real crazy in the future real quick. Let's go 5 years from now, 5 to 10 years from now.
It's a good question. I won't claim to be an expert on the cultivation side, so I'll kind of stay on the product side of it and just say that I'm continually hopeful that we're going to be able to offer more and more kind of specialized products that are going to work for some on the cannabis side, but then branch out into the other crops as well. I think that there's still a little bit of I don't know if hesitation, but there's not as many of those customers that are willing to invest or at least able to invest to the degree needed for our product currently to make it work in a business sense on the like CEA, leafy greens. The crop price just makes the ROI completely different and a little bit difficult to figure out. I'm hoping that all these things that we've been talking about be continually able to reduce costs or at least manage the cost increase is going to help and bridge the gap over into a lot of those other crops. But I will leave the cultivation side and seeing if the market shift and there's more of those indoor leafy greens cultivators here domestically. I'll leave that side to you guys.
But I think what
Cool.
you're saying though is really powerful because whereas we might know how to grow plants, it's still a business at the end of the day, and the products and equipment that we purchase to design these facilities and grow plants can very much have an impact on our business profitability and success or failure, right? So like while you want to keep in the product side and you're thinking about how do I create a product that helps these growers grow these crops that have a lower crop value than cannabis and be successful, essentially what you're saying is how do I make these businesses viable?
Yes.
How do I help build this industry from a product side that allows them to be profitable and actually make this work, which I think is really quite interesting. So don't sell yourself short there, Dell.
Try not to. Try not to.
What about like technologies like, and I don't know how applicable this is, but I recently learned about robo forming versus like roll forming. Are you familiar with this robo forming?
Are you talking about? I don't know the actual name, but two arms that come together and
Two
can form
arms come together and they work it from both
Absolutely.
sides, and I guess it has like a way quicker like ramp up process, and so you're able to do actually quite a bit more. It seems kind of slower, but anyways, yeah, that's the technology I'm talking about. Is there any technologies maybe like that one? And if you're an expert in there, feel free to give a definition on that one besides two arms coming from both sides. But roboforming or anything, I know you use like 3D printers in your daily life anyways, or your regular life. Um, but is there any technology that you're like really interested in that you think could play an impact in the future of vertical farming?
That one is another great question. Um, I don't have anything that's come to mind as what is going to like be a big game changer for us specifically, but we do absolutely want to integrate different manufacturing processes to be able to help again keep costs down, at least change supply chain, and maybe take something from nothing else from one supplier to another and help the costs come down a little bit. I don't think there's anything that's dramatically going to change just because I think that we're capable of manufacturing most of the components that are needed to make those types of businesses viable and even on the horticulture side continue to improve in a lot of ways. One of the things that we are kind of looking towards and hoping to improve is we've had our airflow trays and the gutter beam that goes along with that. And this is another thing we're able to kind of take some notes from Grow Glide and the way that they had developed and manufactured some of these components. And we're hoping to be able to expand and find some suppliers that can do some different deep draw contours and different shapes to the steel, specifically to help that gutter beam kind of flow a little bit more. I know it's one of the things that you guys had brought up, just to make cleanability dramatically easier, far less or ideally no stagnant water in there. But it is a fairly complex geometry and shape to have formed, and traditional roll forming as it exists really doesn't work. And now that I'm talking through this, I'm talking right into maybe that robo forming is the right way to go about that. So maybe I need to find some of those guys and talk to them.
You're welcome. Yeah.
Yeah, I appreciate that. I'll give you credit for it. Don't you worry.
Soon you guys are going to see Dell at some cannabis conference talking about robo forming on stage and how it's going to change the future of vertical farming.
So I know we have, actually quite a few fellow nerds that listen to this podcast, specifically in engineering, and I say that in an endearing way. What's some advice that you would give to an engineer or aspiring product manager looking to break into the horticultural agricultural industry?
I would say that one of my what I think one of my biggest strengths are, and one of the things that I think has helped me a ton, like part of it is trying to be relatively comfortable with the communication and being able to sit down and talk to you guys on podcasts like this, or being able to speak in front of people. Like that's always going to be a benefit. Like communication is kind of the number one piece of advice that I can give to anybody, but specifically to engineering and design and possibly into product management. It's being able to think on all the different layers. It's the kind of like I don't know, like grass to sky. I don't know how you want to frame it, but being able to see it from the 1,000-foot view and understanding how this fits into like the solution, whatever you're developing, fits into the overall ecosystem of the customer and their business, their product, the market, but then also being able to think down extremely granular on understanding the geometry of the way that you form a given singular piece and the way that works with manufacturing and the way that could influence the supply chain. All of those things, those little decisions have kind of a ripple effect through the rest of your company, your development process, and eventually into the market as a whole. So just being able to understand and at least kind of comprehend how that fits into all these different tiers of thoughts, from overall market all the way down to granular little geometry tweaks and changes that you're making on a given solution or product.
I know we've got to kind of wrap things up, and we'll be seeing you in MJ BizCon next week. But by the time this probably airs, it'll have already happened. But I guess, is there like a piece of advice or like a guiding principle that has helped shape your career and some of your kind of day-to-day decision making so far?
I would say like coming at everything as best, like I try to come at everything as best I can with quite a bit of humility, to know that like I don't know everything, and that allows you to remain curious, so you're still asking questions and continually trying to learn. Even if you know 80% of the answer, a lot of the times it's still valuable to ask the question and get the answer and kind of get it explained to you, because there's always this little nugget of information that you hadn't thought about it this particular way. So just trying to stay humble enough to know that you don't know everything, and be curious and willing to actually learn and listen to somebody, not try to listen through the lens of like, this is my perspective and I'm hoping that they align with what I'm about to say or what I already believe, but actually being receptive to somebody else's perspective and outlook on everything.
I think that's really good advice, Del. Well said. And I can attest to your humility. If people that don't know Del, he's like Switzerland. He is really good at taking in advice from all sides and not having a predisposed opinion on a certain topic. So he's very good at that. And if you see him walking around these trade shows, grab him, say hi to him, talk racking systems and engineering with him. He's a very approachable, nice guy.
Always happy to.
Del, pleasure as always. I know there's more exciting things that we're working on that you aren't able to speak as freely about at this time. So that means, guess what? We'll have you back on the podcast here in a few more months, and you can tell everybody all about them.
Looking forward to it.
Really appreciate the time. I know you're a busy man, and I look forward to seeing you very soon. And for our listeners, thank you for listening. Like, smash, poke, buttons,
follow,
do all the things. Subscribe, follow. Yeah, click here, here, and here. And as always, it's a pleasure to serve the plant and to put out good information for people to make the best decisions possible.